Yes.
So when you base anything off of an assumption, it is not a fact unless what you're defining as a fact is arbitrary. Is that what you're doing?
There's a lot of age dating methods for an old Earth that are true, that everyone agrees, young Earth creationists agree are true, until suddenly they're not because flood did magic.
Yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying I think there's actual scientific arguments out there that geologists or young Earth creationist geologists have posed, and I don't know if those have been addressed. Maybe Sam knows. Good to see you, Sam. Thanks for coming in, brother.
Hey, good. I might have to leave. I might have to go run out and pick up my son, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Shalom, Sam.
Hey, what's up, Gavin? Hey, Org.
Hey,
so Org, you said that it wasn't assumption based. Is that right?
No. What I said was, I can say assumption, but I don't want the baggage that can be associated with it.
Yeah. So how did you empirically determine what the beginning ratios are of the father-daughter?
Well,
father-daughter.
We can. Isotopes that radioactively decay are still being formed. So when those things are formed, they decay at the rates when they're formed that they also decay at when they're very old. So
what about the
initial decay rates? So we can therefore assume that since we've never seen different decay rates for these various isotopes we used to date, therefore these decay rates haven't changed.
Survey said.
We know for a fact that carbon dating has dates all over the place, and when they get the results back, the teams look and they see these huge errors, and they just say, well, I guess the fluctuations happen because of the amount of carbon-14 that's in the air. So they admit there's discrepancies, and they admit that there can be flaws. And if they get dates all over the place on items when they actually know the dates, then why do they trust the accuracy of carbon-14? When it's clearly shown to be wrong more than half the time. The fact is, it always comes down to money and popularity. As this professional puts it, that there's incentive to get the oldest date possible. And if that's not bad enough, here we have them begrudgingly admitting that the dates have to be compatible with what they already believe to be true. You talk about biased, you can't get more biased than that.
Yeah, so an argument based off of assumption is not a fact. So the best you can have from that is a...
I've had ham sandwiches in the past. I assume the next time I have a ham sandwich, it's going to taste like a ham sandwich.
I didn't interrupt you. But an argument based off of assumption, the best you can do with that is come to a conclusion, right? It can't be a fact. And how would you address the accelerated nuclear decay? I'm sorry, what?
Why can't my conclusion be a fact?
Because it's based off of an assumption. What if your assumption's wrong? Then your conclusion's wrong.
If I don't have a reason to assume my assumption is wrong, why should I assume it's wrong?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I like to bring up the fact that at one point, we believed that the sun rotated around the Earth.
Yes.
And that was something that at the time everyone said was a fact, but it was something that was based off of assumptions.
Yes.
So when you base anything off of an assumption, it is not a fact unless what you're defining as a fact is arbitrary. Is that what you're doing? Is a fact
please don't
arbitrary?
try to put words in my mouth.
That's a fair question. You're saying that you assume something and therefore it is a fact. But if you've assumed something, then the best you can do with that is come to a conclusion.
So, your example is a completely legitimate one. In the past, we have assumed things to be factual that were incorrect.
Sure.
Earth in the center of the universe, right? The standard answer to this is that answer worked for the time. When we got better information, that answer changed.
Yeah, so
there was no reason to assume the sun did not rotate around the Earth when it didn't matter to what you were doing, right? There's no reason to assume that a rainbow isn't God promising not to murder everyone with flood water when it didn't matter what you were doing. Radiometric dating.
Wait, say that again. Say that again about the rainbow.
Back then, rainbow was God saying he's not going to flood the Earth again. Now we know rainbows cause from diffraction of water, right?
Yeah, so that's a point that I like to bring up as a side note. The rainbow is not the sign of a broken promise.
Please, Sam.
Okay,
let me finish my point, please. So, unless you have a reason to change your thoughts, your assumptions, you don't change your thoughts and assumptions. We changed from geocentric to heliocentric because we had a reason to. We don't have a reason to change from consistent radiometric decay to something else. Therefore, we shouldn't do it because we don't have a reason to.
Survey said.
Just what are the assumptions that are being made when interpreting carbon-14 test results? Actually, there's quite a few. Let's look quickly at just 8 of them. Forest fires, which pump a huge amount of carbon into the atmosphere. Atomic activity and releases, which even double the amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere. Volcanic eruptions that blow carbon even hundreds of miles around the eruption. Industrialization, where factories produce carbon. Solar flares, carbon reservoirs, changes in atmospheric pressures, and variances in the Earth's magnetic field.
So that doesn't refute anything I said in any way. In fact, all you've done is confirmed what I've said, and that you do not have facts from that position. That the best you can do is come to a conclusion based off of your evidence. But if you find out in the future that your assumptions are wrong, then you realize quickly that you never had a fact to begin with. But what about accelerated decay?
So
we've observed accelerated decay, and that
subject, and I'm good with that. But let me finish. Let me say my last point as well, please.
Go ahead.
If you go off the assumption, if you go off the idea that you need to prove something 100% before you can use it, when are you ever going to know that? I'm never going to know that my ham sandwich is always going to taste like a ham sandwich. Right? I think James Randi had a famous quote about if you throw 99 llamas off a building, you don't know the 100th one's going to hit the ground. So you got to keep pushing llamas off the building, and therefore you're never going to know if gravity actually is true, and gravity goes down. That's it's a famous James Randi quote.
Yeah,
the point of it is there's no point in living your life assuming that the ham sandwich isn't going to taste like ham tomorrow. That's a stupid way to live your life. No one does that. You don't do that. I don't do that. Sure, I don't know for a fact ham tastes like ham tomorrow, but I'm still going to make a ham sandwich tomorrow.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty ridiculous analogy, though, in reality, because science doesn't come to a fact. Science comes to a conclusion. And what you've just done, and so, this is a point that I made with Andrew on a much bigger scale, right? That wouldn't necessarily be pertaining to you, but only the biblical worldview offers things that are fundamentally a fact, okay? Because what you're saying is you can never know that something will change in the future. So the best you can do is come to a conclusion. But facts are not consistent with your position. And so as soon as we start to question the Bible and bend what the Bible says in favor of a consensus, a secular consensus nonetheless, that is not objectively true, then all of a sudden our biblical worldview has yield, and then we fall into that same trap.
So Sam, I'll give you a counteraction to your statement.
Well,
here.
Just answer the question, or just really quick. So science deals with conclusions or facts? Which is it?
According to the way you would define it, I'd say science deals with conclusions.
Okay,
and
so
I'll
there
give
you
an
go.
Example.
So
I'll give you an example.
I will allow you.
Let me go, please.
Go
I'll
ahead.
give you an example.
Well, I just asked a question.
The vast majority of geology, the vast majority of explorational geologists, explorational geophysicists work off of the quote-unquote assumptions they were taught in college in the geology classes.
Okay.
And what do? They do exactly what their jobs are told. They find minerals, they find resources, they produce real world results.
Survey said.
Just like other types of radiometric dating, translating carbon-14 test results into calendar years requires assuming a uniform decay rate of the isotopes involved. When scientists attempt to stretch the results of carbon dating back many thousands of years, are any of these assumptions being violated? Do we know about all the forest fires and volcanic eruptions that have occurred in the distant past? Atomic activity, solar flares and cycles, the Earth's magnetic field? Certainly not. We run out of clearly documented historical events that validate these assumptions after just a couple thousand years, and scientists already try to account for the violations of these assumptions that we happen to know about. So, if we know that these assumptions have been violated in our known past of just a couple thousand years and have to account for them, how in the world can we say that there are no violations to these assumptions over the previous tens of thousands of years that aren't confirmed in written history?
Oh, whoa. I reject that. I reject, hold on, I reject that. I reject your arbitrary claim of a real world result. Because again, you're talking about a model that is totally based off of assumption. And furthermore, if you go to North Korea, you're going to find in all of the schools, you're going to find a consensus that tells you that communism is great and North Korea is the most powerful. So your appeal to the majority means nothing. And your secular, don't. Your secular consensus fails. It has a long history of being wrong. So I just find it interesting that you would come here and try to push anything as a fact. When facts, you don't have facts. You have conclusions. Unless you want to define a fact as something that's arbitrary.
Sam, you keep running past the sentences and not letting me respond. You say
you just slapped. I'm not going to let you just slap and say and suggest that somehow your conclusion is what is defined as a real world conclusion. I reject that.
I understand you reject that. That's why we're having a conversation.
So I can just as arbitrarily say the same thing, right? I can say, Org, I wish you guys would just come to the real world and leave your pseudoscience behind. Like I could just arbitrarily say that too. When you don't slap.
Slap?
Yeah, you slap. You make a comment like that.
That's
you're not running. Yeah, well, he's not running, but no, you do. Like if you're gonna throw a jab out there and suggest that that your position represents reality, I reject that.
So
can I go now?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Org. We'll Sam let him finish, and we'll come back to you.
All right, thank you.
Go ahead, Org.
The point I was trying to make, and apparently I got ran over, was a geologist takes their training. I had this exact training, and then they go and they get a job finding minerals, finding oil, finding natural gas, and they take what they learned and they actually find the product. The gas tank in your car, that oil reserve was found by a geologist using the assumptions taught to him in his class. The funny part about that is those assumptions actually found that oil.
Survey said.
Beneath other sediments in the ocean, and in the absence of oxygen, these fossils changed into a substance called kerogen. Under heat and pressure, kerogen gradually changes into oil or gas. The constant pressure and movement of the Earth's crust squeezes oil and gas through the pores or spaces within rocks. Some oil and gas reaches the Earth's surface and seeps out naturally into land or water. Often it is trapped beneath the surface by impermeable layers or rock structures, like faults and folds. Within the crust, oil or gas deposits build up and form reservoirs. Reservoirs are like vast sponges filled with oil and gas. They can be as large as a city. To find oil and gas deposits, geologists use a number of different survey techniques, including seismic surveys, gravitational surveys, and geological mapping. Seismic surveys use reflected sound waves to produce a 3D view of the Earth's interior. New technologies, such as four-dimensional projections and sophisticated graphic renderings of rock structures, are improving the way we find conventional oil and gas deposits.
No geologist in the world is taking young Earth creationist geology and finding oil.
Hold on. Let me. You're gonna make 50 points. So the age of the layer, the assumed age of the layer, has nothing to do with whether or not there's oil in there. And Professor McQueen, who is also a geologist, who has challenged you to abate many times, has that same education and has come to a completely different conclusion.
Yes.
Okay. So when you arbitrarily suggest that somehow your position is the valid position and someone else with a different conclusion isn't, I reject that. And again, where the oil is located at a certain depth has nothing to do with the age assumptions.
So I didn't bring up age of the layers at all in my statement. You're trying to
tie this evolutionary timeline in with oil.
I easily can, because, as I said before, the vast 99.9, name as big as you want a number, of geologists out there that actually find these oil reserves, utilize the skills, utilize the software, utilize the equations, utilize the understanding of geology that is granted by that old Earth.
Idiot.
That has nothing to do with the assigned ages of the layers.
Again,
right?
you keep bringing up assigned ages of layers.
We look for these certain layers, whichever they are, right? And we drill to a certain depth, whatever that depth. They don't care how those layers. By the way, experiments in stratification confirm that these layers are all laid down at the same time in water.
Oh, that's very wrong.
Oh, no, that's very right. Anyone can go and do a fact check right now, and they can look up experiments in stratification, and they can see all of these things are true.
So this is getting
Org, can you empirically verify that the layers lay down the way that you are suggesting lay down? Can you empirically verify that?
Yes.
So I will give you experiments in stratification and Mount St. Helens, observable evidence and laboratory verification. So all you can do is give me assumptions. How can you empirically verify something that you are presupposing took place millions and millions of years ago? How can you duplicate that? Is this another arbitrary fact?
The phrase was assumptions you were using, not arbitrary facts.
Well, if you're going to say something is a fact, and now you're suggesting you can empirically verify millions of years.
Perhaps you should let me say my own words, please. That'd be preferable here.
I will. Give me 1 second. All I'm going to say, unfortunately, I am the one who is slapping and running because I have to go pick up my son.
That's cool.
And I apologize for that. I really do. I'll get back on though in like 30 minutes.
It'll still be going, Sam. It'll still be going when you get there.
Okay. All right. But I will be listening, and so I really do apologize that I have to leave right now.
It's cool.
To do that, so.
I'm rusty at this anyways, so.
Fortunately, there is a way to put carbon-14 dating to the validation test where we can see how accurately it can date items of known ages. This is exactly what the British Science and Engineering Research Council did when they conducted an international blind study on carbon-14 dating by sending out artifacts of known ages to 38 of the world's leading carbon-14 testing laboratories. The results? Only 7 of the 38 laboratories produced dates that were even close to the known dates of the artifacts. That's only 18% of the laboratories in this international study. The rest, 82% of the laboratories, produced dates that were across the board, being off by even thousands of years.
Remember, our model says that worldwide volcanism occurred. We now know that if this were to happen, and what we know about volcanoes throwing massive amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, carbon dating anything from this period would be impossible. because the accuracy would just be so far off. And that's exactly what we see. And this also explains why we have dinosaur bones with carbon in them. Not one atom of carbon-14 should even be there after 100,000 years, let alone millions. Yet sample after sample, we keep finding it in dinosaur bones. The secular model has to invoke contamination. We do not.